is like it's super hard to define. So the first half, we'll try to be looking a little bit into it. And I went to Webster Dictionary and I'm like, let's see how they define stress. So the first definition, and it's the one that we would use like in a medical setting, it would be like a physical, chemical, or emotional factor that causes mental or bodily tension and may be a factor in disease causation. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't really define what I feel when my boss is yelling at me, you know? It's kind of like a loose, like technical definition, but it's really like very much in a box. When you look in stress, there are also definitions such as a force exerted, deformation caused by a force, strain, pressure. And then even more loose when you research, like if you just Google, you'll find grief, perceived threat, nervous, internal conflict, worries, feeling overwhelmed. But if you ask someone to describe stress, like what they feel in their body and the emotions, like those things sometimes are not very accurate. So I wasn't happy with like definitions of stress, and to me it was a little shady. So we've known about the physiology of stress reaction since the 40s, roughly. And what has been refined a lot is the definition of stress, like how so many things that could possibly affect your homeostasis or your internal state could be considered stress. But basically, there's an axis, and our adenohypophysis gland releases CTH, adrenocorticotrophic hormone, that goes to the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands have three layers composed of three sets of hormones: mineralocorticoids, catecholamines, and corticosteroids. It seems and is well understood that stress is a mechanism like recorded and programmed in the body to save your life. So if you get attacked, if you see a lion in nature, or you need to save your life, that system is there and it's in autopilot to save your life. The thing that they shown though is that these hormones, and if you break them down, like if you read about them individually, you can literally like write a book about like mineralocorticoids. Like progesterone is one, corticosteroids, they mobilize sugar, proteins, like you need extra energy, glucose to fight or to fly, catecholamines change heart rate and the strength of the contraction of the heart, and it's like extremely complicated physiology. And yet fascinated, but I was still fascinated with the definition of stress. So the theory is that we go from hunters, gatherers, living in nature, to a modern life, and we're still suffering from stress. So in my doctorate degree, I chose to write about stress again, and I went a little bit in the statistics of like suicide and depression rates and anxiety rates, and the number is just staggering. Like it's doubling, tripling, and it's ridiculous. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, stress supposed to save you from the lion. Why are we so stressed? Why do I feel this way when my boss yells at me, right? We will get to practical application, so just hang with me. Very complicated. So they speak about three types of stress. There's physical stress. Nowadays, CrossFitters choose to feel that for some reason. But before, in the old times, like if you went too far hunting and you didn't find anything, you had to walk all the way back, or walk back to the tribe, like carrying like heavy meat or something. Then your body needed to mobilize those systems so you would get there, right? There's environmental stress, and an example of that would be extreme weather. If you're lost in Alaska, it's cold, you go through cycles of vasodilation, vasoconstriction, the constriction to save body heat, and the dilation so you don't lose the limb, right? But also is a a type of stress, environmental stress. We don't deal too much with it nowadays, clearly. And then the third type, which is inevitably what I would like to expand more on because it's mainly what affects us nowadays, is the emotional stress. And they find over and over again, and when I say that they are refining the definition of stress, is they keep finding that those minor triggers cause that same physiological reaction as if you were fighting the lion or running from it in real life. So, like I said, it's a program to guarantee your survival. It's automatic. You don't have to do anything. It's completely like triggered by a stimulus. However, another thing to make it even more shady, people that come close to death, like rock climbers, like free solo, or people that have encountered like wild animals, they all describe extreme clarity when they're in the face of death, which is not what we experience with our day-to-day stress. Our day-to-day stress is foggy, draining. It's like, dragging. And there's like a clarity when that true stress that we're programmed to feel happens, right? And then when it goes away, it goes away. So I obviously continue my research. I'm not happy with what I'm finding. And then what we find more in psychology, a little bit already getting into this field of psychoanalysis, that is that we have our discursive mind, which is what we're all using right now to talk and analyze, and that's your self-talk, the ongoing discourse in your mind. But we also have this immense realm of the unconscious mind. And then you could also, some people divide the unconscious and the subconscious. We don't need to get too much into it. It's not even that clear to me, 100%. But according to Carl Jung, the unconscious is a little even deeper. Like, whereas your subconscious could have like messages from childhood, the unconscious could have messages from your ancestors even, so that's a little more complicated. But basically the unconscious, now neuroscience, physiologists, physicians, like they're discovering these systems that they're almost like a hardware. They're an HD in your body. They're recorded to function in a certain way. So they have now a word for this, DMN, default mode network. Your neurons and your central nervous system could be wired in a way that it gives you a sense, for example, a self-image. And so you don't do that. You don't decide. You don't wake up in the morning. You can say, stand in front of the mirror, you can say, I feel awesome, I look awesome, and your DMN is saying something else, right? Because of messages, but we'll get a little more into it. Another thing that affects you, and most people don't know, a lot is being talked about that nowadays, but we have a reward system. So endorphins, dopamines, those feel-good hormones, they are triggered by little things that, some people, like, without really analyze, they wouldn't even ever imagine. You wake up you post something on Instagram, you wake up in the morning, first thing you go and you check your post. If you have a lot of likes, you feel great. If you don't have any likes, you feel crappy. One validates you and it gives you like a sense of importance, and the other one doesn't, and then you feel horrible about it, right? So that reward system can be manipulated with habits and a lot of stuff, but we do that unconsciously. And then with stress, we choose more of the fast foods, we choose more of the sugars, we choose recreational drugs, we choose alcohol, bad habits, because we don't understand that reward system, and that's also unconscious. We have a limbic system that is also automatic. The limbic system filters and interprets emotions. It is formed in the first years of life. So with the same example, because we're going to give many more later, the boss yells at me and I feel absolutely nothing, like it doesn't change, my self-image or anything. Or the boss yell at someone and they'll be like depressed for a week, right? Those formation years will wire your limbic system in a way that you respond to triggers. We have a cardiac nervous system, which they show nowadays that respond to stress. They're also part of this trigger to save your life, how you respond to things. And in the early days, I would never imagine that the cardiac system had anything to do with that. And they're like, no, it's actually part of your nervous system. Same thing with the enteric nervous system. You know, we all say, I have a gut feeling. People say, how do you feel in your guts? It is, there's a neuroscientist on Instagram. Sorry for that. It's not a scientific magazine. She's on Instagram, but she has a PhD. She, writes on it, and she has published, so very a lot of credentials. And she says that your enteric nervous system is literally in a physiologic level, medical level, associated with your intuition. And it makes decisions and responds to situations. So very interesting to look into it. The reticular activating system is a system that it actually has organs and wiring and a connection, but it pretty much filters your reality. And that is the craziest part of neuroscience. We never see things, we only see photons. Photons don't have shape or color. The brain produces that. We listen through sound waves. Sound waves don't have sounds, like they hit the tympanic membrane and the brain produces the sound. So it seems like reality is always happening inside of the brain, not outside, and it's how we interpret that. But in practical terms, without trying to get too mystical about it, we have to understand that the boss yells at someone that they feel absolutely nothing, and they yell at someone that will be depressed for a week. And that mechanism has to do, because all the wiring and how they respond to trigger is completely different because of those systems, and they are automatic. So those systems are mainly wired during childhood, and they show how when babies are born, when kids are small, they haven't formed an image or an idea of the world and life. And based on the messages that they receive, they wire those messages, and that's how they're going to respond. What they show is that system is very much responsible for our self-talk, self-esteem, the image that you have of yourself, our sense of safety, how we give and receive love, inner peace versus anxiety, money and career, relationships, right? Sounds obvious, but we can't always detach from the situation and look, is it really me, or I'm just like being triggered, right? Because they are automatic. Now, we're gonna take a small little turn from like physiology, the heavy like neuroscience. The slides are available because there's so much to research into it, and you can see for yourself what I'm saying. I said in the beginning, take with a grain of salt, because I'm here just sharing. I've been studying for 20 years, but I'm not a physiologist or anything. And then in this part, I also ask for your patience, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychoanalyst. I've done a lot of therapy, spoke to therapists, read a lot of books. I'm just gonna share. And the practical ones, and I'll give some examples, they are from my experience, okay? So there's this phrase by Arabi: a child that is abused by their parents doesn't stop loving their parents, they stop loving themselves. And there is a phrase by Oshiro. She said, childhood is a floor we stand on our whole lives. I was going to invite you guys to be a little less in your head and a little more in your body now. Like, this part of the talk is not going to be like so intellectual. So both neuroscience and traditional Chinese medicine, I studied traditional Chinese medicine for 2.5 years. The school went out of business. I decided not to finish. I got certified as a dry needler, and then I'm like, that's it for now. So just didn't have the energy. But both sciences, quote unquote, because there is empirical evidence in Chinese medicine, they've been doing it for thousands of years, they speak about unprocessed emotions. That is a very, very, very important subject, because we are not aware of our emotions. The James Bond destroying the world without dropping his glass of martini is not brave. He's fearful. He's just not aware of his fears. Like, there isn't such a thing. There aren't humans that don't feel emotion. They're psychopaths. That they have an actual dysfunction, right? But anyone like functioning in society, they have emotions. You may not feel it, and this concept is very important. In the first years of life, we mirror mom and dad because all you know is your own universe. Little kid, you only knew you and what you need to strive to survive and to feel good. That has to do with feeding, feeling taken care of, the attention, how you receive love, and all that stuff. If you have a dad, a father, is a type A personality, military, super serious, super extra organized, there is a chance that if you're a little more chaotic, don't make your bed, like you're messy, I might have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, autism, everything you put in the box. Like when I was a kid, that was me. So there is a chance if you have like a military father, like super strict, you may not get the attention and you may get a push away because of how, those little things that he thinks is the most important thing in the world, like being organized. So psychologists show that we mirror mom and dad to receive love, right? So surprise, surprise, there's a good chance you're just like your parents, whether you like it or not. And even the stuff that you heavily reject about them, there's a chance you did that during childhood. However it went wrong, or you didn't get what you needed, or whatever, there are many ways that can go. But it's a fact. We mirror mom and dad to receive attention and to receive love. That's part of the neural connections that we form. In society, we're still talking about unprocessed emotions. We're not allowed to show anger. Anger is ugly. Anger is not religious. Anger is not spiritual. We can't, it's destructive. You can just break stuff. You can just show anger. So it's an emotion that, if you guys have all ever heard of Sigmund Freud, the first thing that you hear is that everything is like repressed sexuality or repressed anger. Then other psychoanalysts that I heavily respect came after him and said, it's not much like that, but he was onto something. Aggression can be repressed and cause physical symptoms, physical issues. We had an employee that when he got angry, he broke in hives. Like, he turned red, his skin changed. Like, the amount of physiology and stress that you have to go through, like, to show in your skin, like, that guy was burning inside, right? Very good friend of mine was never with me, so don't worry. That was never an issue. And another emotion is fear, because, the myths, the legends, the journey of the hero, like, the hero is always like the fearless. He defeats the dragon to save the princess, so it's in a culture, people don't like just drop down and say, I'm afraid, I'm scared, I'm scared of this, it scares me. And it's almost like applaudable that you're like, oh, I'm fearless, I feel no fear. So those emotions can be heavily unprocessed, especially if it has anything to do with a taboo theme, right? We're not going to get into it, but sexuality, right? We don't talk about it, and people have a lot of like fears and misconceptions, but nobody's talking about it. Each on their own, figure it out, right? That's a problem. So psychology comes, psychoanalysis, not my opinion, they're like, it's a real issue that we need to look at. And again, Sigmund Freud would repress sexuality, right? And how many shadows that can form. Subtle messages that we don't look at it and question, but messages like men don't cry. You are raised like that for the first few decades of your life. Men don't cry, macho man, no fear, again, that creates the wiring and the filter that you have about life, especially, obviously, for men in this case. So everything I've been talking about, just put it there like messages and programming in an even more subtle way. Money doesn't fall off the sky. You need to work hard. Um, Marriage sucks. You know, my uncle used to say, marrying is good, but dying burned is better. So those are messages that people like perpetuate, and they're jokes, like jokes that involve like race and sexual preference. That even if you're like, I'm so chill about it, like I don't care, I don't. But you perpetuate. You know, like you heard this your whole life, and that's how this problem becomes like so crystallized because people repeat, and it's a distortion that comes from somewhere that your parents pass to you, you pass to your kids, and it's just like infinite, right? The dangers of the world. This is a huge one because people that suffer from anxiety or fear, and amongst many others, if you ask them, they'll describe the world being like this dangerous place. I mean, I'm 38. Nothing like super dangerous ever happened. Like that. I'm like, oh my God, it's so dangerous. I grew up in Brazil. I heard gunshots after nightclub. I still don't feel like the world is a dangerous place. You know. Now, that's after therapy. Before therapy, the world was a dangerous place. But sometimes some of these fears are based on absolutely nothing, right? People talk about the economy, and if I'm completely honest, we don't know anything about economy, right? I don't know how banks work. I don't know how they choose the price of the barrel of oil, and that affects like the metal that we import from China or whatever. Like all those things are macro economy. Like we don't understand, but people repeat because everyone is saying the economy is whatever. Who said that? What do you know about economy? So this unprocessed messages, emotions, like we just perpetuate without even thinking about it. And there's so much, absolutely every subject in life has something to unpack because someone distorted it at some point and we just perpetuate, right? And on the deepest, darkest side of unprocessed emotions is trauma. And some people think that a 3-year-old or 4-year-old, I'm sorry for the example, but that is true and it happens, that was brutally raped and suffered violence would remember that, and they don't. So when the trauma is too big for the brain to process that, they bury it. And they may grow up to be depressed, they may grow up to be aggressive, they may grow up to be promiscuous, they may grow up to avoid relationships at any cost, and they may be diagnosed with bipolar disease, and they're given some meds to numb or to fix something on the wiring, but nobody is like using the symptom to trace back and fix the trauma, right? Now, to fast forward just a little bit, it is fixable. People have shown time and time again. There's a book that I'm going to recommend, and you guys take a picture if you want or whatever and look into it, but it's called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Van der Kolk, a psychiatrist. Excellent. Phenomenal book. Should be in schools. People should be obligated to read it, right? It's amazing. So, but he shows, and there's evidence that those traumas can be reversed. Carl Jung, the father of psychoanalysis, says that traumas hurt you way more or infinitely more when you're not aware of it than when you become aware of it. So the simple fact of like becoming aware, this happened, this is the mechanism, it loses power. So doesn't 100% goes away, but it loses immense power. And we see even like physical healing when those things happen, right? Which some of the things that I'm going to talk about have to do with that. There is a huge issue with everything we said, and especially unprocessed emotion, which is the problem of self-identification. If that child that was raped and beaten, 4 years old, identify and say, I am bipolar, I am angry, I need to have 10 partners per day or I'm not happy, and they identify with the trauma and how they reacted to the trauma, now they become that. I am bipolar, I'm angry, I'm depressed, I can't feel happy, I need medication, right? Huge issue because from a psychoanalysis perspective, you're never the trauma. Humans always have the potential, like for everything that you want to be, the potential is there. You're not the trauma. So I'm gonna give you a few examples, and again, full disclosure, I never bring this up, and this is serious also like for you guys. We never bring this up like I can help you open up, speak to me, because you may open a can of worms, but you're a therapist and you work with healing, and you can totally like point at the direction, say, look, the researchers show this, so you may want help in this field or with this profession, right? So full disclosure, I never even like pretend that this is what I do, let me fix this, right? So this patient comes with severe headaches. She was family of one of the co-workers that we had, and she had been having headaches for 6 months, and the past like 10 days she was in a hospital. She was hospitalized on heavy morphine. Nothing stopped her headaches. She was throwing up, she couldn't eat. Beautiful young girl, worked out, super healthy otherwise, was having those massive headaches. When she comes to me, physical therapy, she has a diagnosis of occipital neuralgia. The occipital nerve can be compressed here in the extensor muscles and cause headaches and this pain on the back of the head. And when she told me the story, I'm like, look, I'm so sorry, but that's not what you have. This is clearly not occipital neuralgia, because they put her on morphines. They did like 3 MRIs with and without contrast, CT scans. They checked everything, internal organs, blood work, everything. They didn't find anything. So first thing that is absolutely bizarre is how you can have like that level of pain and find nothing, no evidence, with all the imaging technology that we have nowadays. And so I was talking to her and I said, look, if I don't say that, I feel like I'm not being like true to what I understand of medicine and of humans in general. So I'm just gonna say it, and we're not gonna treat this here, but I need you to look into it. And I'm like, there is a theory that old emotions or traumas could cause physical symptoms. If you identify anything that could possibly relate it to these headaches, right, that could be causing the pain, seek medical attention, or professional psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever. But try to work on that. See if they agree with doing some work on that thing, and see how it works. You have nothing to lose, right? We work on a trauma. The worst that can happen is your physical symptom doesn't disappear, right? So when I said that, she teared up, and she said, no, there is definitely something, but I'm not ready to talk about it. I'm like, no, I'm not suggesting, so just look into it, but take my word for it. Like, look for help, try to work that out. We were closed because it was vacation, like some holiday. So I saw her a week later. Mind you, she had just left the hospital after 10 days on morphine. She came back a week later and said, I haven't had a single headache since I left here. It wasn't my manual therapy, I promise you. I'm really good at manual therapy, but that's not what it was. And I didn't do anything either. What we have, like sometimes, like just that key to the lock, like I just pointed something that she wasn't even paying attention. She was just bearing the pain. She came back with absolutely no headaches. Sometimes it's not always obvious, and I wanted to draw your attention because this story can reflect your practice as a PTA. You may own your own practice, you may be working somewhere, you have a lot of, the one-on-one attention with the patient, and those things happen very often. I chose like 3 cases out of hundreds because they're faster and easier to understand. Those stories can be very convoluted, so I just chose those. I was treating my neighbor's mom, and she's one of those like older, like 80 years old, looks like she's 59. Super bubbly, happy, smiley. She always walked in like humming, dancing, messed around with everyone, like super happy. She had like some spinal issue, like thoracic pain. I started working on her, mobilizing, stretching, whatever, and she's getting better. She's happy with therapy. She tells her daughter, my neighbor comes in and says, oh my gosh, she's so happy with you guys. And she looks forward to get there, and she gets there an hour earlier every time just to talk to everyone and drink her coffee and whatever. So one day she walks in and she's quiet. I go to say bye, and I go like expecting her to be all bubbly, and she's like, hi. I'm like, what happened? She's like, I'm in pain. I'm like, what happened? She's like, did you do anything? She's like, eh, I wasn't getting better, but I didn't want to tell you. So, and I was like, I don't believe what people say always. Not because I'm suspicious, but because sometimes what you say is not what you mean. So I'm like, okay, come on in. I'm like, let me see if I find the pain. And I'm like, where does it hurt? And she points at the lumbar. I'm like, I know very well because I have to write it. And there was a diagnosis. Her pain was in the thoracic. I don't think she realized. She's like, oh, it's my lumbar. I'm like, oh, but the pain changed. She's like, no, it's always been like, it's always been that. And now I'm finding a disconnection to what she's telling me. I'm like, okay. I worked on her. I stretch her out. When I was done, just like pure intuition, I'm like, she's not okay. And she won't tell me. So when we're done with the therapy, I just kept some eye contact. And I said, what's going on with you? And she turned her head, like totally avoiding eye contact. She's like, I'm fine. And I was like, okay. She doesn't want to talk about it, but that's fine. So I put my hand on her shoulder and just stayed there. I saw the tear coming out. It became like a crying, became like a bawling, like she could barely catch her breath. So I gave her like a towel, like she was hiding her face, and said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I said, don't feel sorry, it's fine. I bring her to my office, close the door. She cried for like 10 minutes. I just sit there next to her. And my hand on her shoulder. She's like bawling. When she's done, she tells me this huge story of what's going on, like some fight between her children, whatever. But the lesson of the story, two. One, she got up from the bed and she's like, my pain is gone. I'm like, okay, good. Again, it wasn't me, it wasn't the manual therapy. But second, and most important, is how those emotions hide. They hide between like, it's physical therapy. And you could miss that easily. That's not me. You said you were getting better, and you get defensive because you think it's about you, right? This example, I feel very lucky to have witnessed. My wife is certified in RT. That was a technique created by Dr. John Connolly. And she was taking his course, which is 1,000 hours long. And then I was listening on 2X, trying to do like as much as I could, like and listen. And one of the students that he was certifying jumps in to ask a question, right? It's about the technique. She's there. She's being certified to be a therapist. And she unmutes and says, hey, John, and she says something about like a physical symptom and whatever. And he's like, when did it start? And she's like, well, and the story leads to, I was extremely busy. And she says, I raised my 6 siblings. And she's like, smiling. She's all like bubbly. He doesn't let that slide. He's like, you raised your 6 siblings? And she says, yeah. And he's like, would you mind if I ask you would you mind if we expand on it? She says, no, not at all. And he's like, what happened? Why did you raise your siblings? She's like, well, my dad was in and out of jail and my mom was an alcoholic. So I had to do everything at home. And she, again, like she's laughing and she's like, all bubbly. And he says, that might have been really hard. And he's like, and when you say like raising them, like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, school, homework, parents' meetings, doctors, injections, medicine, everything. And he's like, oh my God. And he's like, listen, at my age, with the resources that I have, I wouldn't have been able to do that. This is phenomenal. I can't believe you did that by yourself. And then now she's crying. And he said, about the symptom that you have, is like, do you mind if I work with you? And she's like, no. And then she's already crying. And he said, I got you. Now you're safe. Now you can relax. I got you. And she was bawling, crying. And he said, now it's your turn. You relax. And I got your back. We're going to fix you. Most people, most people I know, if someone says, I raised 6 siblings smiling, they would say, oh, wow. Right? Oh, wow. And let's continue talking. So even the heaviest burden, like those deep, deep emotions can come, behind like a little bubbly, like smile or something. And we can catch that if we understand how those emotions work. Carl Jung says, when you understand your own emotions, you understand other people's emotions. When you don't understand your own emotions, you don't understand other people's emotions. That's why aggression is a big one. When someone is mad and they're giving attitude and they're agitated, everyone gets agitated because everyone has repressed aggression. Everyone. Your profession does not come without challenges. Sorry to be the person that breaks the news, but there are a lot of challenges in the PTA profession. If you decide to have a baby, we would all say, oh my God, that's marvelous. Like, it's the most beautiful thing. Indeed, like, it's the most beautiful thing, the most beautiful choice you can have. I have 2 boys. There's nothing compared to having babies, but it doesn't come without challenges, right? If you have a baby and you think it's going to be like in a soap opera, like he's going to sleep all day and never cry and look cute all the time, you're in for a big surprise. And if you think that the PTA profession is without challenges, you're in for a big surprise. Being ready for it doesn't mean it's bad. And I'm not trying to talk you out of it. It's the opposite. Just like babies is like the biggest miracle of life, but it is extremely challenging. So, amongst other things that you will deal with, there is reimbursement. Unfortunately, there's a phenomena where insurances are reimbursing less and less, trying to, not approve physical therapy and all that stuff. People like shortcuts in general. So instead of like doing their rehab and fixing the right way, they prefer like a short of cortisone and, get out of it. Work hours, because business owners, because they get reimbursed less and they're the ones like dealing with insurance and reimbursement, they have to increase the volume of patients and increase their hours. So it's very high volume. It's a model that works like McDonald's, right? It's cheap, it's accessible, and they make money in volume, right? But obviously, it's not the only thing. There are like clinic owners that, do the self-pay, the higher paying insurances, and is way more one-on-one. But we have to understand that you may go to a place where the environment is very healthy, but because of a financial situation, you will see a higher volume and you need to take care of yourself, right? Professional relationships. Again, hate to be the one to break for you, but a lot of PTAs complain of PTs walking around with the iPad and giving orders and not really treating patients, So you guys are there like dirtying your hands and putting in the work all day to be called tax, ACE, or whatever. And I tell my PTAs, I own my practice, I tell them, you guys are the professionals. Assess them. You come to me with a diagnosis. Something changed, you tell me. And if they don't, I'll ask them, and why. I call it the exorcism because they hate the nerve of like being asked. But I'm like, don't rub feet. Like, you rehab. You understand the tissues. You understand how they inflame, how they remodel. You understand why you need to strengthen, why you need to stabilize. When a condition is restrictive and you need to stretch, and when a condition is hyperflexibility, hypermobile, and you need to strengthen. Like, you guys understand that. You have more than enough ortho and biomechanics and physiology and all this stuff to be a phenomenal clinician, right? Patients' personalities, needless to say. Do we need to expand on that? No. Physical exhaustion, obviously, for all what is said, but also, like, if I can be completely honest, I believe in energy. Some people will drain your energy more than others, surprisingly. And you will see for yourselves, like, You work with some people that is so like energizing and rewarding, and other people that for absolutely no reason, they're not being difficult or anything, but they really drain you, right? So if by any chance you feel it is worth learning some techniques and taking care of your energy, better than just leaving it all at work, right? In Chinese medicine, they have a concept of Jing. Jing is essence, the translation. It's kind of like a battery that you're born with. So technically, you're born with a certain amount of Jing, and then you just waste it throughout your life. And it's funny because in the desert, you can die of dehydration without being aware of it. Your bodies don't feel the symptoms of dehydration. So people die in the desert with water in their containers because they don't know. And when I heard that concept of Jing, I was like, that's similar. Like they say that you're not gonna feel it, you're not gonna know, but you'll be like leaving your life force at work if you don't take care of it. And there are ways to preserve that, right? And obviously the last one, stress, which is what we're talking about. Completely different to go to work all bubbly inspired and go to work dragging and just expecting another war. At some point in my profession, I hope you guys are asking why there's a Burger King logo, right? I almost lost my motivation, like to the point that I have a joke about it, the profession that I was gonna choose, but I'm not gonna say that. So I said I'm gonna stop being a therapist and do something else. I was really frustrated. I was frustrated with everything that happened, though nobody told me, and I had like to figure it out. But the last straw was I was sitting with myself, and I'm like, I have to remember why I chose this. Because if it's an accident, if I just land it here, then I'm not gonna do this anymore. And I remember some decades ago, an employee of Burger King served this guy that had like a physical disability, and the guy couldn't eat by himself. The kid was like 15 years old. He saw the guy struggling. He went around the counter and fed the guy until he finished his food. And I was like, okay. And I remember, I'm like, it's if we don't put our heart in helping people the way this kid does, then you know, then you're in the wrong profession. You know, you don't have to. Nobody put a gun to your head to be a therapist. But if you do, like, then remember the meaning. Remember why you're doing this, because when money doesn't pay, the internal reward will make up for it. And you can have both, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting you won't make money, you will. But the reward that you get from inside is so much more important. That's why I said, never forget why you started. Have your reasons clearly stated. It's important to know, because at some point you can forget. You could forget why you started. You could get caught on your savings account and looking in the debt and little things and this working, not working, or degrees and all that stuff, and it can be confusing. Like, at least have your GPS always pointing at where you want to be. Like, have your priorities. That's important. Dream big, because there is a humongous difference between rubbing feet, right? What do? I massage. Versus what do? I heal people. I rehab people. We get people out of surgery. Like, we work with them in a mental level, in an emotional level, in a spiritual level, in a physical level. Like, you put meaning to what you do. And when I say dream big, a lot of you guys come with a background of professional dancing, art, martial arts. All those things can be integrated in therapy, and it becomes creative and becomes you, and it becomes your signature, and it becomes something that you created, and it could even like be the new like technique that we're going to use in the future. But you have to have a vision and go for, because if not, you're just rubbing people with lotion, and that is meaningless. That's not worth the paycheck. Take care of yourself. Expressing your feelings versus the persona. Let me explain this. The persona is what Carl Jung called like the mask that we wear every day. So when you go to work and you put your scrubs and you need to be the professional, the smiley, the understanding, the loving therapist, you're wearing a mask. Because nobody's like that all the time, right? And not my words, the words of psychoanalysis is they suggest a healthy balance between the persona, like what you need to be during the day, which is normal. It's how we organize society and how we get where we are. But do listen to your feelings, right? There are many ways of expressing feelings without having to break the room and set it on fire. Um, Martial arts, dancing, talking to a therapist, to your significant other, but not showing. People underestimate how just saying like I'm irritated, the value that it has. You're showing, you're feeling, and you're saying it. I'm irritated. Are you gonna go and slap someone? No. You need to be rude about it? No, but you're a human being and you have feelings. And we don't know how to fix it, but we know that bearing doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We don't know what to do with it. So, however you can, and there are many ways, understand that you do have feelings and you have to listen to it. There's something in physics, another disclosure. I'm not a physicist. It's called the butterfly effect. And another disclosure, I can't get on board with it, but I wanted to repeat the concept because physicists study this thing as if it were like serious. They say that a butterfly flopping its wings in Europe can cause a tornado across the Atlantic. Again, I can't get on board with that. I'm like, no, it's impossible. But they have like calculations and whatever. But what I think is cool about it, that people that talk about the butterfly effect, they say that your actions, like you never see the end of your actions, right? The person that I had the conversation in the clinic may have gotten home that day and heard her kids and said something beautiful that she was pretending not to see, and the kids might have stopped fighting. And maybe that day they had a romantic dinner with their wives, which they didn't do in a long time, and their wives were feeling like self-conscious. And they treated their kids better that were going to school and bullying other kids. And that day they didn't. They made peace with the kids. So, and that goes on and on and on, right? So we don't know. I'm only speculating, but we don't know. But there is such a thing as the butterfly effect. What you do will always affect other people, right? You will always have patients' testimonials. They will tell you. Don't just believe anything I'm saying. If you're like, you know what, he was on to something that you want to like pursue, pay attention and learn more from and be a good listener, you'll hear that. They will tell you. So don't just take my word for it. Go and see for yourself. And like I said before, your feelings do matter. You're the therapist. You're healing people. You're always in that caretaking role, personality. And there is a chance you may forget about yourself. Don't forget about yourself. Your feelings do matter. There's a phrase by Dr. Seuss that I love that says, be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. People that matter in your life, they'll accept you for who you are with your shadows, because we all have it. People that judge you for your minor weaknesses or mistakes or whatever it is, they shouldn't matter. They're not the ones that are going to bring you forward. So, final considerations. Listening is a skill that can be developed. Someone can speak to you and you're in a different world. You just hear like babbling in the background. Some people can speak to you and you're listening to the words, but they have no effect on you. Some people may speak to you and you really feel what they are telling you. And you can really feel what they're telling you. And now there's a fourth one. People may talk to you and you feel all that, but you also understand what they're telling you without telling you. Their voice, their body language, and the things that they try masking with their words, right? A patient came in recently. The things I have too many examples, so if I give you, I have to hold myself to give examples, but Try to make it short. This patient comes in with every symptom of stress, TMJ, cervicalgia, upper tract pain, nasty, horrible, on meds, injections, doesn't feel better. I asked her, I give the concept of stress and unprocessed emotions, and I say, do you have any stress? And she's like, no, everything's perfect in my family, at work, in the job. And what do you do then? Nothing. I just told him, like, look, keep an eye on it. There, you could have like some strong emotion that is just being pushed under the rug, right? I love this word intuition because it's all became mystical, but there's nothing mystical about it. It's just something like the connection that you develop after a while. It occurred to me, I was going somewhere else, but I said, where are your parents? She started bawling, crying, like couldn't catch her breath. So I was gonna ask about their personality, if they're around, whatever. I just make conversation. Again, this time it'll sound like I'm just exaggerating. Like she comes back and she's like, I haven't had any pain since, right? Well, again, it wasn't my manual therapy, right? So listening is a skill that you can develop. Everyone, there's a phrase by Sean, what's Sean's last name? Yeah, Sean Callery. He says, people only talk about what they want to talk about. So when you're talking to someone and they're like, I just ended a relationship, but I don't want to talk about it, and they move on, guess what? They want to talk about it, right? And you can be forceful. I took a course with Paulo Freire, and he says the heart has a door that only opens from inside. When you're forceful, like when you try, like, I know about emotions, give me, cry on my shoulder, like, it's not going to work. Like, you have to build rapport. It's subtle, and the person only expresses if they trust you, right? There is a cheesy, but I love this kind of concept of Tianqi and the barefoot doctors. In ancient China, the acupuncturists were called barefoot doctors. And it's funny because they were farmers, they couldn't read or write, completely like uneducated, like super poor, and they dedicated their whole life to healing people. That's all they did. There's a classic of traditional Chinese medicine, supposed to be the first book written by the Yellow Emperor, called Wan Di Nei Jing, the classic of the Yellow Emperor. And in the book, he's talking to Chibo. Chibo was a barefoot doctor. So all the knowledge in the book is from a farmer guy. Chibo is not from the emperor. The emperor just wrote the book. And in where I come from, have you guys heard of curanderas? It's like healing old ladies that just use like herbs to heal. So it seems like in every culture there are those people that dedicate to healing. They don't know how to read or write. They don't make any money whatsoever. A whole bunch of them don't charge. They won't charge you a penny. And they have lines of people every single day to be healed by them. In Mexico, there was one called Pachita. She worked 7 days a week. There were like hundreds of people outside of her house every single day. So again, I look at that and I'm like, that has to be what we do. This should be the center focus of the physical therapy profession, right? Everything else is just, the money, the hours, whatever, rehab, And they have a concept of Tianqi. For them, Qi is like an energy that we have in our body, and you can cultivate with Tai Chi, Qigong, breathing exercises like pranayama. But Tianqi is a type of, it translates to heaven Qi. You only receive that when you give to people. So only healers have it. And in Taoism, the process of becoming a healer is very lengthy. Like, it's not like, okay, go, use your hands, right? Nowadays you get certified in Reiki like a weekend and you already start like giving out healings. In Taoism, it's not like that. Like decades of preparation. And interestingly enough, they only receive Tianqi. They only start working with these energies when they're already like way ahead of the process. right? So I also think it's cool because in a way, we're going to be doing this, might as well understand that they're like universal forces behind the stuff that we do. I also highlighted our need to be heard. Like the phrase by Oshiro, childhood is a floor that we stand on our whole lives. Everyone wants to be heard. When you have a new idea, when you're excited about the project, you want to tell and you want someone to be excited with you. You don't want someone to like, okay. Everyone is like that, right? It's a well-known phenomena. So I find it important to listen to people and to develop that skill, but I also invite people to understand their need to be heard. Like you need to be heard sometimes. You need someone to give their full attention. And then to finish, this Buddha, Confucius, and Lao Tzu, it's a story in Taoism. In Taoism, they have a concept of yin and yang, and for them, everything is necessary, right? Day is as necessary as night. Positive is as necessary as negative. Heat and cold, male and female, up and down, inside and out, centripetal forces, centrifugal forces. Everything for them in the universe is a balance of these forces. And it's interesting because looking in the body, at some point I was like, okay, we all talk about oxygen, like we need oxygen to live, but crank up the oxygen like 24/7 and you just breathe oxygen and see what happens. You die, right? Same thing with CO2. So those forces have to be in balance. They're both necessary. We also have a acid-base balance in the body. The body takes care of that. And now there are alkaline diets and alkaline. I'm like, if you alkalinize too much, you'll die, right? By a few points, very sensitive. So they were onto something when they saw forces operating for like higher balance. And I just think is a nice concept. So there's this story of Buddha, Confucius, and Lao Tzu drinking tea. And the disciple mistaken the tea and put vinegar. And then he serves vinegar to them. They're sitting around. So Buddha drinks the tea, the vinegar, and says, that's why this existence is just emptiness and meaningless. And kind of like a joke because there's a lot of like meaninglessness in Buddhism, in the Buddhist tradition. Confucius drinks a sip and says, that's why we need to work on morals and ethics, because he comes from a time in China where they really direct people into like doing the right thing and, you know, being a perfect human being. So he's like, that's why we need to work on morals. And Lao Tzu, which is the father of Taoism, drinks the tea and smiles. And the first time I read that, I was like, what's the rest of the story? Like I didn't understand. But the message is someone served him tea wrongly, right? And served him vinegar. And he drinks and says, it's okay. In Taoism, everything is okay. It's okay. And those things are part of balancing forces. And if you really like question everything that you think is ugly and wrong about life, like we have to consider something deeper, like there's a purpose, right? Evolution. So these are the books that I recommend, from the easiest to the hardest, from left to right. The easiest one to understand is the left. I highly, highly recommend it. It's absolutely phenomenal. Adult Children of Emotionally Mature Parents. Lindsay Gibson's a PhD. The book is super like dynamic, you know, straight on, not repetitive, small. I mentioned The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. van der Kolk. It's a little heavier, a little harder. I mean, it's not hard to understand. It's just a little heavier. It's thicker. There are no images, but extremely valuable. Amazing book. And then the last one is Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. That version that I posted is illustrated. Trust me, it's easier to understand the illustrated one. I read this book 3 times. 10 years ago, didn't understand a word. 5 years ago, understood very little, and I read now the third time and understood absolutely everything. So you need a lot of background to understand Carl Jung. But you can, and you can kind of like look into it, and little bits and parts of like symbolic language and dreams and, you know, emotions or whatever you'll see in the book. And I highly recommend. I wanted to thank you guys because I have a problem with like fidgeting, people like falling asleep and being on their phone, and you guys gave me your full attention, so I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. And I was gonna obviously, thank you, open for questions.